I remember walking into that office for the first time. The building stood tall among others in the city skyline, glass reflecting the morning sun like it was trying to hide something behind its shine. I had just turned 24 and had been searching for a job for months, sending out applications, going through interviews, pretending I wasn't desperate. When I finally got the offer, I felt like I'd won something, like I'd earned my place in the world. My heart raced as I stepped inside the lobby, the air smelling faintly of coffee and fresh paint. Everything looked clean, modern, alive. There were people already at workstations, phones ringing softly, keyboards clicking like tiny drums playing a steady beat. A receptionist smiled warmly and told me someone would be down to meet me. I stood there, clutching my bag, trying not to look nervous. That's when I saw him for the first time. He walked into the lobby with a presence that made everything around him feel smaller. Tall, confident, dressed in a crisp suit that fit him perfectly. His hair was dark with just a hint of silver at the temples, his eyes sharp but kind. He didn't look like most bosses I'd imagined, cold, distant, always buried in spreadsheets. No, he looked like someone who belonged in a magazine or on the cover of a book about success. He introduced himself as Daniel, the owner of the company. His voice was smooth, deep, and calm. He shook my hand firmly, holding eye contact just long enough to make me feel seen. "Welcome aboard," he said, and I swear my stomach flipped. It wasn't just because he was attractive, it was more than that. There was something in his energy, in the way he carried himself, that made me want to impress him, to be noticed by him. He led me upstairs to the office space, giving me a quick tour along the way. The team was small but passionate, full of creatives and strategists who seemed genuinely excited about what they were doing. Everyone greeted him with respect, but also warmth, like they liked working for him, not just because he was good at his job, but because he treated them well. We reached my desk, and he handed me a notebook and a pen. "You'll need these," he said with a small smile. I nodded, feeling awkward but strangely hopeful. As he walked away, I couldn't help but watch him go, wondering if I was imagining the way he glanced back at me before disappearing into his office. The day passed quickly. People were friendly, the work felt meaningful, and I kept thinking about how easy it was to imagine staying here for a long time. But no matter how hard I tried to focus on my tasks, my mind kept drifting back to him. Not just his looks, but his confidence, his intelligence, the way he spoke. I told myself it was just admiration. After all, he was my boss. And I was just starting out. But even then, I knew something had shifted. Something had changed the moment our hands touched during that handshake. I just didn't know how much it would change everything. It started with a look. Then came the silence between words. And finally, the way he said my name. We were working late again. The office was quiet except for the soft hum of the lights and the occasional click of a keyboard from someone still buried in their work. I had gotten used to these nights, long hours, shared meals, and quiet conversations that somehow always ended up being just between us. It wasn't planned. It just happened. Every time there was something to finish, Daniel would glance over at me and say, "You're staying late, right?" As if it was already decided. And I never said no. That night, we were going over the final edits for a big client presentation. We sat side by side on the long conference table, laptops open, papers scattered everywhere. He leaned closer to point something out on my screen, his arm brushing against mine. I tried not to react, but the warmth of his skin made my heart skip a beat. He didn't move away. Instead, he stayed close, reading over what I had written, occasionally nodding or making a small comment. His voice was low, almost a whisper, like he didn't want anyone else to hear. Like this was our secret moment. When we finally finished, he stood up and stretched, letting out a tired laugh. "Another one down," he said, running a hand through his hair. I smiled, watching him without meaning to. He caught me looking and held my gaze for a second too long before turning toward the kitchen. "Coffee?" he asked. I nodded, following him without thinking. As the machine buzzed behind him, he leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. "You know," he said slowly, "you've been really impressive lately." I blinked, surprised. "I mean it," he continued. "You're not just good at your job, you bring something different here. Something real." I felt my face warm up. I wanted to say thank you, to make a joke, to pretend it didn't mean more than it should have. But I couldn't find the words. All I could do was stand there, holding his stare, wondering if he could see how much I wanted to believe him. The weeks that followed were filled with those little moments, small, almost insignificant things that added up until they meant everything. A lingering touch when he handed me a file. A smile that lasted just a second longer than usual. The way he remembered my favorite drink order without me ever telling him. People around us started to notice. One afternoon, while we were sitting in a meeting room going over a new campaign idea, Lena, our graphic designer, smirked and said, "You two should just go out already." I froze. Daniel laughed, shaking his head. "She's got a point," he said casually, but I saw the way his eyes flickered toward me before he looked away. My stomach twisted into knots. After that, the teasing became more frequent. People joked about us being a couple, pretending to book double dates or asking if we'd be bringing each other to company events. Each time, Daniel played it off with humor, but I noticed how he never outright denied it. And neither did I. I told myself it was harmless, that people were just having fun. But deep down, I knew something was happening. I knew I was starting to feel something I shouldn't. One evening, after another late night of work, we walked out to the parking lot together. It had started raining, and the air smelled fresh, like the city had finally washed itself clean. He offered me an umbrella, but I shook my head. "I like the rain," I admitted. He smiled, stepping closer. "So do I," he said, and then we both just stood there, neither of us moving. The streetlights above cast a soft glow, and I could see every detail of his face, the lines around his eyes, the way his lips curved slightly even when he wasn't fully smiling. I don't know who moved first, but suddenly we were standing so close I could feel his breath against my cheek. For a heartbeat, I thought he might kiss me. But instead, he whispered, "You know, I really enjoy working with you." Then he stepped back, opened his umbrella, and walked away. I stood there, soaked and stunned, replaying his words over and over in my head. Did he mean it, or was it just another one of those moments where he let something slip before pulling himself back in line? I wanted to ask him. I wanted to demand an answer. But I couldn't, because the truth was, I was terrified of what he might say. Terrified that maybe he didn't feel anything at all. Or worse, that he did. And yet, I couldn't stop thinking about him. Even when I tried to focus on other things, my mind wandered back to him. To the way he looked at me. To the way he spoke to me. To the way he made me feel like I mattered, not just as an employee, but as a person. As someone worth knowing, someone worth wanting, but I also couldn't ignore the reality of it all. He was my employer. There were rules, boundaries, things that weren't supposed to happen. And yet, I couldn't help but wonder, if the world wasn't watching, if no one was keeping score, if it was just the two of us, what would we be? I didn't have the answer. Not yet, but I knew one thing for sure, whatever this was between us, it was only just beginning. It started with a mistake, or at least, that's what I told myself later. A moment of weakness, a lapse in judgment, a line we both knew not to cross but somehow did anyway. And once it was crossed, there was no going back. The rain had been falling all day, turning the city into a blur of reflections and shadows. The office emptied early because of the weather, most people opting to leave before the streets became completely flooded. Daniel stayed late, as usual, and so did I. I wasn't sure if it was out of habit or something else, some unspoken understanding that tonight would be different. He called me into his office just after 7. "I need your help with this final draft," he said, standing by the window with his hands in his pockets, watching the rain pour down like it was telling him something important. I nodded and walked inside, closing the door behind me. His office always felt different from the rest of the building, quieter, warmer, like it belonged to another world entirely. The lights were dimmed, the blinds half closed, and the scent of his cologne lingered in the air, mixing with the faint smell of old books and coffee. We sat side by side on the couch near his desk, laptops open, papers scattered between us. At first, we worked in silence, the only sound being the occasional tap of keys and the steady rhythm of rain against the windows. But then, without warning, he reached over and brushed a strand of hair from my face. It was such a small gesture, barely anything at all, but it sent a jolt through my entire body. My breath caught. I turned to look at him, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen before, not just admiration or curiosity, but longing. "I've wanted to do that for a long time," he admitted, voice low, almost hesitant. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My heart was pounding too loudly in my chest, drowning out everything else. He leaned in slowly, giving me a chance to pull away, to remind him of the rules we weren't supposed to break. But I didn't move. I let him kiss me. It was soft at first, gentle, unsure, like neither of us could believe it was actually happening. Then it deepened, becoming more urgent, more real. His hand cupped my face, his fingers threading through my hair as if trying to memorize every part of me. I kissed him back like I had been waiting for this moment my entire life, like I had built up years of quiet desire just for this 1 second. We should have stopped. We should have talked about it, thought about the consequences, done anything other than give in. But we didn't. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard, eyes locked together in a silent conversation that said everything words couldn't. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "This is insane," he muttered, almost to himself. "We can't do this." I swallowed hard, nodding even though every part of me screamed in protest. He stood up abruptly, pacing across the room. "You're my employee," he continued, voice tight. "There are rules about this. Boundaries." He looked at me again, frustration flickering across his face. I shouldn't have let this happen. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to apologize, to pretend it never happened. Another part wanted to tell him I didn't care about the rules, that I wanted him anyway. But I stayed quiet, letting the weight of reality settle between us. For a while, nothing changed. Or at least, we tried to pretend it hadn't. We went back to work, kept our distance, avoided lingering glances. But the tension was always there, simmering beneath the surface. It showed in the way he watched me when he thought I wasn't looking, in the way his voice softened whenever he spoke to me, in the way he sometimes hesitated before leaving the room, like he wanted to say something but never did. Then came the moments where the lines blurred again. A lunch alone in his office. A late-night ride home in the elevator where his hand brushed mine and neither of us moved away. A shared umbrella under the pouring rain, standing close enough that our shoulders touched. Each time, we told ourselves it was just a mistake. Just a slip. Just one more time. But eventually, we stopped pretending. One night, after everyone had left, he asked me to stay. "Just for a little while," he said, holding my gaze like he needed me to understand something without having to explain it aloud. I nodded, walking back into his office with my heart already racing. This time, there was no hesitation. No guilt. No pretending it wouldn't happen again. We made love for the first time that night, hidden away from the world, wrapped in each other like we were trying to forget everything except the way we felt. Afterward, we lay tangled in each other's arms, the city lights blinking outside the window like distant stars. He pressed a kiss to my forehead, whispering, "We shouldn't be doing this." I closed my eyes, resting my head against his chest. "I know," I murmured. But neither of us wanted to stop. And so, the secrecy began. We became experts at hiding it. Quick touches in empty hallways. Whispered conversations during meetings, late nights spent together under the guise of work. We told ourselves it was necessary, that we were protecting ourselves, protecting the company, protecting whatever fragile thing we had built between us. But the truth was, we were scared. Not just of getting caught, but of what this meant. Of what it said about us. Some days, I hated myself for it. For letting it happen. For knowing how wrong it was and still wanting him anyway. Other days, I hated him, for making me feel like I was the only one struggling with this, like he had some kind of control I didn't. But most days, I just hated the situation. Hated that we had found each other in a place where we weren't supposed to. Still, I couldn't walk away. Because despite everything, the risks, the guilt, the fear, I loved him. And somewhere, buried beneath all the layers of caution and self-preservation, I think he loved me too. Even if we weren't ready to admit it out loud, I told him I loved him before I even understood what that meant. It slipped out during one of those quiet, stolen moments we had become so good at creating, wrapped in the warmth of his apartment, the city lights blinking outside like distant stars, the silence between us filled only by the soft hum of the air conditioner and the steady rhythm of our breathing. We were lying tangled in each other's arms, still catching our breath after another night where everything else in the world faded away except for us. My heart was full, my mind spinning with all the things I had been holding back for so long. And then it just came out. I love you. The words felt heavier than I expected. They landed between us like a stone dropped into water, rippling outward, changing everything. He didn't say anything at first. His fingers, which had been lazily tracing patterns along my bare arm, stopped moving. I could feel him tense slightly, as if he wasn't sure how to respond, or if he should respond at all. I turned my head to look at him, searching his face for something, anything. Surprise, fear, regret, but his expression was unreadable. He stared up at the ceiling, jaw tight, lips pressed together in a thin line. Then, after a long pause, he exhaled slowly and sat up, pulling the sheet around his waist as he moved to the edge of the bed. "Don't say that," he said quietly. I felt my stomach drop. "Why not?" My voice came out softer than I intended, almost fragile. "Isn't that what this is?" He shook his head, rubbing his temples like he was trying to push something painful away. "You don't understand," he muttered. "You're young, you think love is simple. That's saying it makes everything okay." He turned to face me then, eyes dark with something I couldn't quite place. "But it's not. Not for people like us." I sat up too, wrapping the sheet around me. "People like us," I repeated, confused. "What does that mean?" He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head again. "You really don't know, do you?" He stood suddenly, pacing across the room. "This, whatever we're doing, it's not normal. It never was. And love," he scoffed, running a hand through his hair. "Love doesn't fix that." I watched him move, frustration rising in my chest. "Then why are we here?" I asked. "Why did you kiss me that night in the rain? Why did you bring me here, over and over again, if it meant nothing?" He stopped pacing and looked at me. Really looked at me. For the first time in a long while, there was no mask, no carefully crafted expression hiding what he truly felt. Just raw honesty. And it scared me. "Because I wanted you," he admitted. "God help me, I wanted you more than I've ever wanted anyone." His voice cracked slightly, and he swallowed hard before continuing. "But wanting isn't the same as being ready. And I'm not. I haven't been for a long time." I didn't know what to say. I had imagined this moment 100 different ways, some hopeful, some terrifying, but none of them ended like this. I had thought he would pull me close, whisper that he loved me too, promise that we'd figure everything out together. Instead, he looked like he was standing on the edge of something he wasn't sure he wanted to jump from. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly feeling cold despite the warmth of the room. "Then why now?" I asked. "Why start this if you weren't ready?" He sighed, sitting back down beside me. "Because I thought I could control it," he said. "I thought I could keep it casual. Just physical. Something to distract me from everything else." He ran a hand down his face. "But then you started looking at me like I mattered. Like I was someone worth loving. And I panicked." I blinked back tears, swallowing the lump forming in my throat. "So what am I to you?" I whispered. "Just a distraction." His eyes snapped to mine, wide with something that looked dangerously close to guilt. "No," he said quickly, reaching for my hand. "Never that. You're the best part of this. The only part that feels real." He squeezed my fingers gently. "It's just complicated." I pulled my hand away. "Then explain it to me," I said. "Tell me why this has to be so hard." He hesitated, staring at the floor for a long moment before finally speaking. "I used to be in love once," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "A long time ago. Before all of this. Before the company, before the money, before any of it mattered." He took a deep breath, like he was bracing himself. "His name was Matthew. We met in college. Everything about it felt right. We were reckless, passionate, stupid in that way only young people can be." A small, sad smile touched his lips. "We thought we'd last forever." I stayed quiet, listening intently. "But the world," he trailed off, shaking his head. "It wasn't kind to us. His parents found out, disowned him. Mine never accepted it either. He broke up with me because he couldn't take the pressure anymore. Said it was easier to walk away than fight every day just to be who he was." His voice wavered slightly, but he kept going. I tried to move on. Tried to pretend it hadn't changed me. But it did. It broke me. I felt my chest tighten. I wanted to reach for him, to hold him, but I stayed still, letting him speak. "For years, I told myself I didn't need love," he continued. "That I was better off alone. I built this life, this empire, to prove that I didn't need anyone. That I could survive without being vulnerable again." He looked at me then, eyes glistening. "And then you walked in. My breath caught. You reminded me of what it felt like to want something real," he said. To feel something I didn't know what to say. All I could do was sit there, absorbing everything he had just shared, trying to make sense of it all. He had spent so long protecting himself, building walls so high they seemed impossible to climb. And somehow, I had found a way inside. I'm not asking you to give me everything, I said finally. I'm not asking for promises or guarantees. I just want the truth. I reached for his hand again, this time holding it tightly. Do you care about me? His grip tightened around mine. More than I should. And do you want this to end? He shook his head immediately. No, he admitted. I don't. But I don't know if I can give you what you deserve. I leaned forward, pressing my forehead against his. Then don't worry about what you can't give, I whispered. Just give me what you can. He was quiet for a long time. Then, slowly, he pulled me into his arms, holding me like he was afraid I might disappear. Okay, he murmured against my hair. Okay. And in that moment, it felt like maybe, just maybe, we had a chance. Not a perfect one, not an easy one, but a chance nonetheless. And for now, that was enough. Loving someone shouldn't feel like breaking every rule in the book. But here we were, caught between two worlds, one built on professionalism and control, the other on passion and truth, and neither of us knew how to live in both at once. The first real crack came not from within, but from outside. A coworker, someone who had always seemed harmless, even friendly, saw something they weren't supposed to. It was late again, and we were alone in the office, going over a project that needed last-minute adjustments before the client meeting the next morning. We had gotten used to working these hours together, slipping into the rhythm of quiet conversations and shared meals under the soft glow of desk lamps. The office was empty except for us, or so we thought. We had been sitting close, his hand resting lightly on my thigh as I scrolled through edits on my laptop. He leaned in to whisper something about a sentence I had changed, his lips brushing against my ear just long enough to send a shiver down my spine. That's when we heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps retreating too quickly. At first, we ignored it. Pretended it was nothing, but by the next morning, whispers had already started circulating. Nothing overt, nothing anyone could point to directly, but there were knowing glances, hushed voices whenever we walked into a room together, and an unspoken tension that hadn't been there before. Lena, our graphic designer and one of the few people I considered a friend at work, pulled me aside during lunch. I don't care what you're doing, she said quietly, eyes scanning the room before landing back on me. But be careful. I blinked at her, confused. What do you mean? She sighed, lowering her voice even more. People are talking. They say you and Daniel have been spending too much time together. Alone. Late at night. My stomach dropped. It's not like that, I lied automatically. It doesn't matter what it is like, she said. What matters is what people think it is. And right now, people are thinking things. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because deep down, I knew she was right. That afternoon, Daniel called me into his office. His usual calm demeanor was replaced with something harder to read, tense, guarded, almost angry. He closed the door behind me and stood with his back to me for a moment, hands gripping the edge of his desk like he needed something to hold onto. Someone saw us, he said without turning around. I swallowed hard. Yeah, I heard. He exhaled sharply, finally facing me. This can't keep happening. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. What are you talking about? This, he gestured vaguely between us. Us. Sneaking around. Letting people get suspicious. It's not fair, to either of us. I stepped forward. You don't mean that. His jaw tightened. Don't I? He ran a hand through his hair, pacing slightly. You know what this looks like from the outside. You're my employee. People already question whether your position is based on merit or favoritism. Do you really want to give them proof? I flinched at his words, feeling them cut deeper than I expected. So that's what you think? That I'm just some mistake you made? No, he said quickly, but there was hesitation in his voice. That's not what I meant. Then what is it? I demanded. Because I need to know if this is real to you or if I've just been lying to myself this whole time. He looked at me then, not just at me, but into me. Like he was trying to decide whether I deserved the truth or not. I want you, he admitted finally. God help me, I want you more than I should. But I also have a company to run. A reputation to maintain. And I won't let anything destroy what I've built. So I'm a risk, I said bitterly. Something to be hidden away until it becomes inconvenient. He shook his head. You're not a risk. You're a complication. I laughed, though there was no humor in it. And what? You don't do complications. I used to, he said softly. They broke me. I stared at him, heart pounding in my chest. So that's it. You're just going to walk away because you're scared. His expression darkened. I'm not walking away. I'm protecting us. From what? I shot back. From being seen. From being real. He didn't answer. I took a step closer. You told me once that I reminded you of what it felt like to want something real. So why are you letting fear win now? He looked away. Because love doesn't fix everything. No, I agreed. But pretending it doesn't exist isn't either. There was silence between us, thick and heavy. Then he turned back to me, eyes tired. Give me time, he said. Please. Just, let me figure out how to make this work without losing everything else. I wanted to argue. To demand more. To tell him that waiting wasn't an answer, that uncertainty wasn't a promise. But all I did was nod. Okay, I whispered. And then I left. For days after that, things changed. He kept his distance. No lingering touches. No late-night meetings. No stolen moments in empty hallways. We became strangers again, at least on the surface. But beneath it, there was still something. A current running between us, unseen but undeniable. Still, the damage was done. The rumors didn't stop. If anything, they grew worse. Some people assumed I was sleeping my way to success. Others thought he was taking advantage of me. And worst of all, I started questioning everything. My place at the company, my worth beyond this relationship, my ability to separate love from self-doubt. One night, after another long day of pretending nothing was wrong, I got a text from him. Can I come over? I hesitated before replying. Part of me wanted to say no. To protect myself. But the stronger part, the part that still loved him despite everything, answered yes. When he arrived, he didn't speak at first. Just walked inside, closed the door behind him, and pulled me into his arms like he hadn't touched me in years instead of just days. I melted into him instinctively, breathing him in, feeling the weight of everything we had been carrying lift, if only for a moment. I missed you, he murmured against my hair. I squeezed him tighter. I missed you too. He pulled back just enough to look at me. I don't know how to make this work, he admitted. But I don't want to lose you. You won't, I promised. And for the first time in days, I believed it. But the world wasn't done testing us yet. Because sometimes, the hardest part of loving someone isn't the secrecy or the fear. It's realizing that the person you love might not be ready to fight for you the way you deserve. Loving someone shouldn't feel like breaking every rule in the book. But here we were, caught between two worlds, one built on professionalism and control, the other on passion and truth, and neither of us knew how to live in both at once. The first real crack came not from within, but from outside. A coworker, someone who had always seemed harmless, even friendly, saw something they weren't supposed to. It was late again, and we were alone in the office, going over a project that needed last-minute adjustments before the client meeting the next morning. We had gotten used to working these hours together, slipping into the rhythm of quiet conversations and shared meals under the soft glow of desk lamps. The office was empty except for us, or so we thought. We had been sitting close, his hand resting lightly on my thigh as I scrolled through edits on my laptop. He leaned in to whisper something about a sentence I had changed, his lips brushing against my ear just long enough to send a shiver down my spine. That's when we heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps retreating too quickly. At first, we ignored it. Pretended it was nothing. But by the next morning, whispers had already started circulating. Nothing overt, nothing anyone could point to directly, but there were knowing glances, hushed voices whenever we walked into a room together, and an unspoken tension that hadn't been there before. Lena, our graphic designer and one of the few people I considered a friend at work, pulled me aside during lunch. I don't care what you're doing, she said quietly, eyes scanning the room before landing back on me. But be careful. I blinked at her, confused. What do you mean? She sighed, lowering her voice even more. People are talking. They say you and Daniel have been spending too much time together. Alone. Late at night. My stomach dropped. It's not like that, I lied automatically. It doesn't matter what it is like, she said. What matters is what people think it is. And right now, People are thinking things. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because deep down, I knew she was right. That afternoon, Daniel called me into his office. His usual calm demeanor was replaced with something harder to read, tense, guarded, almost angry. He closed the door behind me and stood with his back to me for a moment, hands gripping the edge of his desk like he needed something to hold onto. "Someone saw us," he said without turning around. I swallowed hard. "Yeah, I heard." He exhaled sharply, finally facing me. "This can't keep happening." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. "What are you talking about?" "This," he gestured vaguely between us. "Us. Sneaking around. Letting people get suspicious. It's not fair, to either of us." I stepped forward. "You don't mean that." His jaw tightened. "Don't I?" He ran a hand through his hair, pacing slightly. "You know what this looks like from the outside. You're my employee. People already question whether your position is based on merit or favoritism. Do you really want to give them proof?" I flinched at his words, feeling them cut deeper than I expected. "So that's what you think? That I'm just some mistake you made?" "No," he said quickly, but there was hesitation in his voice. "That's not what I meant." "Then what is it?" I demanded. "Because I need to know if this is real to you or if I've just been lying to myself this whole time." He looked at me then, not just at me, but into me. Like he was trying to decide whether I deserved the truth or not. "I want you," he admitted finally. "God help me, I want you more than I should. But I also have a company to run. A reputation to maintain. And I won't let anything destroy what I've built. So I'm a risk," I said bitterly. "Something to be hidden away until it becomes inconvenient." He shook his head. "You're not a risk. You're a complication." I laughed, though there was no humor in it. "And what? You don't do complications." "I used to," he said softly. "They broke me." I stared at him, heart pounding in my chest. "So that's it. You're just going to walk away because you're scared." His expression darkened. "I'm not walking away. I'm protecting us." "From what?" I shot back. "From being seen. From being real." He looked away. "Because love doesn't fix everything." "No," I agreed. "But pretending it doesn't exist isn't either." There was silence between us, thick and heavy. Then he turned back to me, eyes tired. "Give me time," he said. "Please. Just let me figure out how to make this work without losing everything else." I wanted to argue. To demand more. To tell him that waiting wasn't an answer, that uncertainty wasn't a promise. But all I did was nod. "Okay," I whispered. And then I left. For days after that, things changed. He kept his distance. No lingering touches. No late-night meetings. No stolen moments in empty hallways. We became strangers again, at least on the surface. But beneath it, there was still something. A current running between us, unseen but undeniable. Still, the damage was done. The rumors didn't stop. If anything, they grew worse. Some people assumed I was sleeping my way to success. Others thought he was taking advantage of me. And worst of all, I started questioning everything: my place at the company, my worth beyond this relationship, my ability to separate love from self-doubt. One night, after another long day of pretending nothing was wrong, I got a text from him. "Can I come over?" I hesitated before replying. Part of me wanted to say no. To protect myself. But the stronger part, the part that still loved him despite everything, answered yes. When he arrived, he didn't speak at first. Just walked inside, closed the door behind him, and pulled me into his arms like he hadn't touched me in years instead of just days. I melted into him instinctively, breathing him in, feeling the weight of everything we had been carrying lift, if only for a moment. "I missed you," he murmured against my hair. I squeezed him tighter. "I missed you too." He pulled back just enough to look at me. "I don't know how to make this work," he admitted. "But I don't want to lose you." "You won't," I promised. And for the first time in days, I believed it. But the world wasn't done testing us yet. Because sometimes, the hardest part of loving someone isn't the secrecy or the fear. It's realizing that the person you love might not be ready to fight for you the way you deserve. I remember the moment I decided to tell my family. It wasn't some dramatic, tear-filled confession or a carefully planned conversation over dinner. It was quiet, unassuming, the kind of moment that doesn't feel like much at first, until you realize it changes everything. We were sitting in the living room after Sunday lunch, the remnants of food still on the table, the TV murmuring softly in the background. My mother was knitting something she never seemed to finish, my father flipping through a newspaper he probably wouldn't read all the way through, and my younger sister was scrolling through her phone with that half-annoyed, half-bored expression she always wore around them. I had rehearsed what I would say 1,000 times in my head, but now that I was here, surrounded by the people who had raised me, loved me, shaped me into who I wasn't sure if I could do it. But then Daniel's words came back to me, the ones he had whispered to me late one night when we were tangled in each other's arms, both exhausted and raw from more than just sex. You deserve happiness too. And suddenly, I knew I couldn't keep hiding. I need to say something, I said, voice shaking slightly. Everyone looked up. My mother set her knitting aside. My father lowered his paper. My sister paused mid-scroll, sensing the shift in the air. I've been seeing someone, I started, choosing my words carefully. My mother smiled. Oh, that's wonderful. Why haven't you told us before? I hesitated. Because, it's not exactly the kind of relationship you'd expect. They exchanged confused glances. What do you mean? My father asked, brow furrowed. I took a deep breath. It's a man. The silence that followed was heavier than I expected. Not angry. Not violent. Just heavy. Like the air itself had thickened. My mother blinked slowly, as if trying to process the words. My father didn't speak right away. My sister stared at me, unreadable. Then my mother finally spoke. You're gay. I nodded. She looked down at her hands, then back up at me. Since when? A while now, I admitted. It's not something I just decided. It's just something I've always known. I just didn't know how to say it out loud. She didn't respond immediately. Neither did anyone else. And for a second, I thought maybe this was the end of it, that they would look at me differently now, that they would see me as something less than who I had always been. Then my sister stood up and walked over to me, wrapping her arms around me tightly. I don't care, she whispered. You're still you. That hug felt like oxygen after being underwater for too long. My mother exhaled slowly, rubbing her temples. This is just unexpected. It's not a surprise to me, my father said quietly, surprising everyone. He met my eyes. I always suspected. I swallowed hard. And you're okay with it? He studied me for a long moment, then gave a small nod. I'm your father. I love you. That doesn't change. My mother sighed, standing up. I need time, she admitted. This is just different from what I imagined for you. I understood. She had grown up in a world where love like mine was either hidden or condemned. It wasn't hate, it was fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of judgment. Fear of not knowing how to support something she had never been taught to accept. I get it, I said gently. You don't have to understand everything right away. Just try to listen. Try to see me for who I am. She didn't answer right away. But she didn't walk away either. And that was enough, for now. Later that night, I called Daniel. He answered on the second ring. You did it, he said before I even spoke. How did you know? You sound different, he replied. Like you're breathing easier. I smiled faintly. It went better than I expected. That's good, he said softly. Then, after a pause, can I come over? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to feel him beside me, to let his presence soothe the lingering nerves that still clung to my chest. But there was something else I needed to ask him. Will you ever tell yours? There was a long silence. I don't know, he admitted finally. You should, I said gently. Not for them, for you. He exhaled sharply. It's not that simple. It never is, I agreed. But you deserve to be seen too. He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quieter. I'll think about it. That was all I could ask for. Weeks passed, and things settled into a new rhythm. My family didn't fully embrace it yet, but they didn't reject me either. My mother still struggled, asking questions that made me cringe sometimes, like if I was sure, or if I thought it was just a phase. My father remained mostly silent on the topic, though I could tell he was watching me more closely, trying to understand without prying too hard. My sister became my strongest ally, defending me whenever things got tense, reminding me that I had someone in my corner no matter what. As for Daniel, he kept his distance from my personal life. He respected the boundaries I had to set, never pushing me to rush anything with my family. But I could see the conflict in him, the way he watched me talk about coming out like it was something he wanted for himself but didn't know how to reach. One evening, after a particularly stressful day at work, I found him sitting alone in his office, staring out the window. I knocked lightly on the doorframe, and he turned to me with a tired smile. "Hey," he said. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. "You okay?" He shrugged. "Just thinking." I walked over, sitting beside him on the couch. "About what?" He hesitated. Then, almost reluctantly, he spoke. "I saw my brother last weekend." I blinked. "You have a brother?" He nodded. "Older. We used to be close. Before everything changed." I waited for him to continue. "He got married last year," Daniel said. "Had a kid 6 months ago. He invited me to their house for dinner. Said he wanted me to meet his son." I stayed quiet, sensing the weight behind his words. "I went," he continued. "But I didn't stay long. His wife didn't seem thrilled I was there. His parents weren't exactly warm either. And when I tried to talk to him, really talk, he shut me down. Said we should just focus on the baby. Pretend like nothing else mattered." I reached for his hand. "Did you tell him?" "No," he admitted. "I wanted to. But I couldn't bring myself to say it out loud." I squeezed his fingers gently. "Why not?" He shook his head. "Because I'm scared. Scared of losing him. Scared of how they'll look at me. Scared of what it means if I actually say it out loud." I leaned my head against his shoulder. "You don't have to do it all at once," I said softly. "But if you want to be real, if you want to stop hiding, you have to start somewhere." He was quiet for a long time. Then, finally, he whispered, "I want to be real." I lifted my head to look at him. "Then let's start." A few weeks later, he invited me to go with him to visit his friend, someone he trusted, someone he had known since college. I didn't know much about her, except that she had always been a constant presence in his life, even during the years he spent pretending he was someone else. We sat across from each other at a quiet cafe, sipping coffee while Daniel fidgeted with his cup. "She knows," he said suddenly. I blinked. "Knows what?" "That I'm gay." I stared at him. "You told her?" He nodded. "Years ago. Back when I was still trying to pretend it didn't define me." I didn't know what to say. I had assumed he had never told anyone outside of work. The fact that he had shared that part of himself with someone, even if it was years ago, meant more than I could put into words. "She didn't react badly," he continued. "Actually, she just laughed and said she already knew." I smiled faintly. "People usually do." He looked at me then, really looked at me, like he was seeing something he hadn't noticed before. "You make it seem so easy," he murmured. "It's not," I admitted. "But it gets easier. Every time you choose honesty over fear." He was quiet again, then finally asked, "What if I brought her here?" "To talk. Just once." I tilted my head. "You want to tell her about us?" He nodded slowly. "I think I do." I reached across the table, covering his hand with mine. "Then let's do it." And just like that, the walls he had built around himself began to crack. It wasn't immediate. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real. For the first time in his life, Daniel chose to step out of the shadows, not because the world demanded it, but because he deserved to live in the light. And I was going to be there with him, every step of the way. We weren't perfect. But we were finally real. That's how I would describe us now, not the passionate, secret-filled beginning, not the pain of hiding and pretending, but something quieter. Something stronger. A love that had been tested, reshaped, and rebuilt into something neither of us could have imagined when we first met. The days turned into months, and with each one, we grew more comfortable in our own skin, more honest with each other, more fearless in the world. We moved in together, not because we felt like we needed to prove anything, but because it just felt right. No more stolen moments or late-night sneaks out of his office building. No more pretending we were just employer and employee. We lived openly, unapologetically, for the first time. It wasn't without struggle. There were still hard conversations. Moments where fear crept back in. Times when Daniel hesitated before holding my hand in public, when he flinched at a stare or a whisper from someone who didn't understand. And sometimes, I got tired of waiting for him to catch up. Tired of being the one who always took the first step toward bravery. But then there were the good days, the ones that reminded me why I stayed. The mornings when he kissed me awake with no rush, no guilt, just soft lips and sleepy smiles. The evenings when we cooked dinner together, arguing playfully over whether the pasta was done or if he had added too much salt again. The nights when we sat on the couch, wrapped in each other, watching movies we had already seen a dozen times just because they made us feel safe. One of those nights, after a long day at work, I turned to him and said, "You know, people are going to ask us about this." He raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "About how we got here," I clarified. "About how two people who started off so wrong ended up being so right." He smiled faintly, pulling me closer. "What will you tell them?" I thought about it for a moment. That love doesn't always follow the rules. That sometimes, the people who change your life come into it at the worst possible time. That we both had to learn how to be honest, with the world, and with ourselves. He nodded slowly, as if agreeing with something he had only just realized himself. We weren't the same people we had been when we first met. We had changed, grown, broken, healed, fought, loved harder than we ever thought possible. And maybe that was the point all along. Maybe the journey was never meant to be easy. Maybe it was meant to teach us how to be brave enough to want something real. There were still things we hadn't figured out yet. Big things. Like family, like the future, like what it really meant to build a life together beyond just sharing a home. But we were learning. Every day. Daniel started opening up more. About his past, about the parts of himself he used to hate, about the things he wanted to change. He talked to his friend more often, the one who had known the truth about him for years. He even invited her over for dinner one night, and for the first time, he didn't seem afraid to show her how much I meant to him. Later that evening, as we walked home under the city lights, he looked at me and said, "She asked me something tonight." "What did she say?" I asked. "She asked if I was happy." He paused, glancing at me. And I told her yes. For the first time in a long time, I really am. I smiled, squeezing his hand. "Good." He stopped walking, turning to face me fully. "You know, I used to think happiness was something I had to earn. That I had to prove I deserved it. But now," he exhaled, shaking his head slightly. "Now I realize it's not about proving anything. It's just about showing up. Being present. Letting yourself feel it, even when you're scared." I leaned in, resting my forehead against his. "You deserve to feel it." "I know," he whispered. "Because of you." We stood like that for a while, just breathing in the quiet of the night, letting the weight of everything we had been through settle into something peaceful. We weren't perfect, but we were healing. Together. And that was enough. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own journey, or if it gave you hope for something better, hit the like button. Share it with someone who might need to hear it today. If you've ever struggled with who you are, if you've ever loved someone in secret, if you've ever felt like you didn't belong, drop a comment below. Let's build a space where love wins, always. Thank you for watching. Stay strong, stay true, and remember, your story is far from over.